All right, I will start then. Hey everyone, and welcome to our first session of writing essays. And we are welcoming Nathalie Groot, who is our speaker, and I will just let her speak a bit about herself.
Hi, so I'm Nathalie Groot. I'm a PhD student in molecular biosciences at Rutgers University, New Brunswick in New Jersey. I completed my undergrad at Virginia Tech in 2020 fall, and I matriculated to Rutgers in spring of 2021. So I've been here for like 6 months now. And as you can tell, I've been in American schools a lot, so I know a bit about essay writing for applications. So let's get started.
Yep. Thank you so much for taking your time and coming. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure all the people here also appreciate your time and your sharing knowledge. So the floor is yours. And
Okay.
you can get started.
So I'm going to come at this from the viewpoint of you're applying to undergrad or writing like high school to college application level things that you need to submit in order to get accepted into different programs. Because I feel like that's probably what you guys are writing for. If you're not, let me know and I can change the subject of what I'm talking about. But basically, when you're writing an essay, especially for college admissions, it needs to have a certain flow to it. It needs to have like a progression of a story. So for example, when I wrote my essay about college admissions, I wrote about my experience growing up as a person of color in the United States and how that impacted my childhood. Because a lot of times the admissions committees want to understand you as a person through your essays. So if you talk about something that shaped your life or shaped how you think, that will give them a good understanding of who you are. Because your GPA and your grades and your extracurriculars will give them a general sense of that. But everyone who's applying also has those same experiences. And they also have like an impressive GPA and an impressive application repertoire. But your essay is kind of what personalizes you to them, because they're just sitting there in a room with 30,000 applications that they have to go through. And the number one thing they're probably going to read is going to be your essay. It's not going to be like, oh, they have a 4.0 GPA. Like that is what gets you in the door. And your essay is what gets you into the college. And so for me, my school actually went through like an essay writing section when I was in like my junior year, which is like my 11th year of high school. And from that, my teacher basically ended up telling us like, hey guys, what you need to do to write this essay is like figure out what your word limit is and then figure out what story you want to tell, because it should have like a natural progression. It can't just be like, this happened and like there's no conclusion to it and there's no beginning to it. You need to think about what you're trying to tell them, because you can tell them just any old story and that necessarily won't help. But if you tell them a story of like, oh, like I was having a really hard time in my English class, but I sat down with one of my friends who like knows English really well and we studied really hard, and that's why I'm able to like apply to this school today. And like there's difficulty in accessing English classes in my country, and that makes it like hard for people to apply here, but like I've worked really hard to get here and I've tried really hard to make sure that my literacy level is high enough that I can function well in your company or in your university. And I know that I could handle this. And I hope that you understand where I'm coming from when I tell you this story. That's kind of like what you want to say. You want to make sure that they are hearing about you as a person, but also hearing about what you have to offer them. It's kind of like a sales pitch where you're like, oh, I need to make sure that if I am trying to get them to hire me, that I make it as attractive of an opportunity as possible. And part of that is also tailoring your application to the school that you are applying to. So for example, when I wrote my paper to submit to Virginia Tech to get in for undergrad, something that I focused on heavily was my experience as a person of color, because my mother is Black and my father is white. And so Virginia Tech is in a more rural setting. So it has a predominantly white student population. So their admissions office focuses a lot on recruiting people of color and particularly international students. And so something that will help you get into a school like that is like, here's my experience, and this is what I could bring to Virginia Tech, because currently they're trying to do a lot more recruiting for international students and students of color to diversify their campus, because a primary complaint from a lot of students is like, hey, I would like to see more people like me here. And the school is listening and they're doing their best to kind of fulfill that wish from their students. And that's a thing that a lot of US universities are doing right now. So your experience as someone who's in Uzbekistan, growing up in Uzbekistan, would be a really unique perspective for a school to have. And that's something that they would find extremely attractive on your application. Because, for example, I was like 21 when I met Max. She's the first person from Uzbekistan I have ever met. I thought that was super cool. I was like, I don't know anyone from Central Asia. I don't know anything about Central Asia. And it was a really good learning experience for me. And I feel like I grew a lot as a person when I met her. So you could bring those same opportunities to your school, and they definitely will value your perspective because it's a unique perspective they probably haven't had the opportunity of hearing from yet. And so if you want to write an application, that might be something that's good to focus on. Like, oh, I grew up in Uzbekistan and this is what it's like, but I would like to have the experience of going to the US and like sharing my culture with the people there. And that could be something you could focus on. You could also focus on like academic struggles. Like for me, y'all might have heard me talking to Max earlier, and I was like, I can't do math. I struggle a lot with math. And as someone who's in a PhD program, it's important to note, like, I'm going to need to use some kinds of math, but I don't need to know calculus. But my school will, like, my undergrad made me take that. And so my struggle with math is something I could have written about. I could have said like, oh, like I struggled with math a lot as a kid. And for me, like my dad is an American, he's from the Netherlands. So when he would teach me math, he wouldn't teach me math in the way that the Americans wanted me to know math. So I would use like derivatives of equations and they would be like, you can't do that. And so that's something you could write about. You could write about like, oh, like when I was growing up, I struggled a lot with math and my parents tried to help me out, but it wasn't the way that my teacher wanted to do it. And it just resulted in like miscommunications with my teacher and me not getting good grades, but it's something I've overcome. And even though math isn't the easiest subject for me, it's something that I know I need to use and I'm going to do my best to understand. Because it's basically just, you want to present a struggle that you've overcome and you want to present who you are and how that will benefit them. Because it's primarily about trying to market yourself to the university. Because as far as I'm concerned, you guys all have a unique perspective that the university would really love to have present for their other students, for themselves, just in general. And if you write that well and market that well to them, there's basically no chance that they would reject you, because it's important for universities to be diverse. And that's something that they're really noticing in the US right now. And so your experience as not only an international person, but also a person from Central Asia is something that you can definitely use to benefit yourself. But does anyone have any questions? Because I don't want to just talk your ears off. Oh, yes.
Sharafuddin, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes.
My name is Sharafuddin. Okay, I live in Tashkent. I'm just staff for Agile University in Tashkent. Then I have some questions. Like you studied. I think you have been studying Rutgers University. Is it?
Yes.
Yep. Then I got acquaintance some of university requirements like Texas University and California Polytechnic University, California University, this kind of universities.
Yeah.
Then I did my master degree in China, okay, in like English course, and I got English medium instruction certificate. Then I have been trying to apply and looking for kind of opportunity by applying for requirement of English language yeah, demanding things. Yeah. Do you have any experience or how can I say knowledge about it? What do you say? Just I sent some letters and kind of documentation to professor to choose as a supervisor from this kind of universities, but I haven't got any replies yet. That's why I'm getting worried. How is it possible or not? Then when I send my questions to international departments, to appropriate international departments for these universities, they only sent me a link of FAQ question answers. I think. Yeah. This kind of things. That's why, yeah, I want to ask if you know, please.
Okay, so when it comes to emailing people and trying to get a response from university professors, they get a lot of emails. And so a lot of times they see it, it pops up, it just gets buried in every other email they're getting from the university. So an important thing to do is put all the information they need about you in one email. So like include your CV, include if you feel it's necessary, like pictures of your diplomas. Say like, I have these experiences and I would like to have you as a mentor, or like I'm applying to this graduate program and I would like to know what's going on here. Just like make everything explicitly clear in one email, include everything you think they could possibly ever ask you for in the email, because if it's all one email and they open it and they see that everything's laid out for them, then they'll be pretty happy because they don't have to like email back and forth with you to try and get information out of you. Another thing to note is they don't want to read like 5 paragraphs in an email. If you could do it in like 5 sentences or less, that would probably be best, because a major problem they have, like, for example, I'm on the faculty list of my university because of my position as a PhD student. I get probably 30 emails a day. I can't read 30 emails a day because I have other things that I need to do. So if the email is not concise, I'm not going to read it. And a lot of times the subject line is important for me reading something, because if the subject line is just questions, I'm not going to open it. Because one of my friends actually got an interview request recently, and the only thing in the subject line was interview ? And I looked at him and I said, if I got an email that said that, I would delete it, because you're not like telling me anything in that subject line. So a good subject line would be like, Uzbek student who is looking for a mentor in the United States. Or like, you can always put your name at the end of it too, because I know something that my professors struggle with a lot is like keeping track of all of us, because there's a lot of students in my program and a lot of students have Rutgers in general. So it's easier if like you respond to the email that you already sent and you just say like, hey, following up, I don't know if you've seen this, and like, just in case, here's some documents if you would like to see them. And I just like to reiterate my interest in having you as a mentor. But another thing to note is sometimes they just don't have time to be mentors, and that's okay. And you just need to choose another professor in the department. Because like, for example, for my PhD, I'm doing rotations. So I'm basically choosing a lab that I will complete my PhD in right now. And I emailed a professor who does a specific type of cancer research. And I was like, hey, I think it would be very interesting to rotate in your lab. Do you mind giving me a tour? And like, can I talk to some of your grad students before I commit to rotating there? And he never responded. And I simply took that as he just doesn't have the time or willpower to deal with me. And that's not something that I think I would want from a mentor, because if they're not going to respond to my emails in a timely fashion and they're not going to get things done when they needed to be done, then I'm not going to be interested in working with them, because they're going to act the same in their emails as they're going to act in real life. So make sure you choose someone as your mentor, not just because of what their CV looks like, but also how they communicate and like how they guide you, because that's a big thing. Like if they're guiding you and they're like, oh, kind of harsh, and it's not something that you feel comfortable with, or they speak in a way that you don't necessarily understand, that can be something that leads to the breakdown of a mentor-mentee relationship. And you need to choose people that you think are going to be good for your personal growth and also good for your mental health. Like the best thing isn't always like the best person. It's a person who is well balanced.
All right, thank you. Then what's frequently, like I face this kind of things. What's a deadline for these universities? Like for international students, yeah, or as an international applicants. Then how many times applicants could apply for USA universities? Do you know?
So it depends on the university. A lot of times they don't really mind if you apply multiple times, but if you didn't get in the first time, then maybe you should reconsider applying to that university, just because they've already seen your application. So unless something on it has changed drastically, they're probably not going to look at it when you send it in again. And then it would be a waste of your money and your time. So for me, when I was applying to my PhD programs, I had a pretty good sense that I'd already had an internship at Rutgers and they would like to have me back for my PhD. So, and I knew it was a school that I liked. So it was somewhere that I was willing to continue my education at. Because at Virginia Tech, I had a really good lab that I worked in there, but there were some people in the lab that I just didn't get along with. And I was like, I don't think that it's reasonable for me to stay here and apply here, even though I know that everyone here would love for me to stay. And that's something that you have to think about when you're applying to places, because sometimes even if you think a place is a good fit for you, it might not be, and you may need to move just because situations have changed, circumstances have changed, and there's better places for you. Because a lot of times that's also what schools are saying when they don't accept you. They're saying like, I don't think this is a good place for you, and I don't think it's a good fit for you. And the deadlines for international students, they might be a little bit earlier than for American national students, but they will be on the school's website. So they will say like application deadline is January 15th, and you will just have to have everything submitted by then. And so something that I always was concerned about is the people that are writing my rec letters, submitting my rec letters on time. So a lot of times what I would do is I would make sure that I would ask for my rec letters long before I needed them, like 2 months in advance, just so that they would have the full 2 months to get those rec letters in. Because another thing that universities don't tell you, but is important to know when you're applying, is that the earlier you apply, the more likely you are to get money and the more likely you are to get in, because they have more money and more space at the beginning of the application season. So as the season progresses, like if you submit on the deadline, the likelihood of you getting like grants or the likelihood of you getting in point blank, like at all, is a lot lower. So you should probably apply as soon as the application opens in November. I'm assuming this is for graduate school. Grad school applications typically open sometime in November, late November. So I would apply as soon as it opens in November. I would start talking to my recommenders for my letters in September so that they would have the time to write it. And a lot of the systems in the United States have like an automatic emailing system for submission of rec letters. So you put in whoever's writing your rec letters email, and it will send them an email. Then you follow up and you say, you should have gotten an email from Rutgers for your application, for my application. So please look for that, check your spam, let me know if you've received it, and please submit the letter by X date. And they, like, a lot of times the website will also allow you to see if it's been submitted, but they don't want you to see the rec letter. So another important thing is to make sure if you're getting a rec letter from someone, that they are writing you a rec letter that you would want to be seen by other people. Like if you are just like, oh, I worked with them for 2 years, like I want them to write my rec letter, they know me very well, I think they'll write it well, that should be fine. But if you're choosing someone that doesn't know you very well, the rec letter won't be as strong, and they can tell when they're reading it. So you should choose people like professors that you had and were close to in graduate school, or if you were doing like research or teaching, other teachers that you like worked with that were superior to you, like up there on the food chain for your rec letters. I don't know what the requirements are for master's programs, because I went in straight out of my undergrad for a PhD, just because I didn't want to pay for a master's, but it should be very similar to applying to a PhD program. And honestly, a lot of the information that you need is on the website. And another big thing, if you haven't heard back from them, email the department coordinators, because they will get things done faster than you thought possible. So if you're concerned about your application, usually it will say at the bottom of the page, like department coordinator, Don Cortez, like email here. And so then you can email them and be like, hey, I submitted my application 2 months ago. I haven't heard anything back. Do you know when interviews are? Have I gotten an interview? I would just like to follow up on my application. And a lot of times they'll reply and they'll be like, yeah, like it's moved forward in the next round of like basically checking applicants, and you will be hearing from us soon. Because a lot of times if your application is like right on the edge and you email them, that will push you into the next level, because now they've put a face to the name on a sheet of paper, and that makes you someone that they've interacted with before, and that makes it harder for them to like reject your application, because they're like, oh, that's somebody I know, like he seemed so nice in his email, he was very polite, I'm just gonna like go into the room where they're checking the applications and be like, hey, have you guys seen an application from like Max? Like she emailed me and she was really sweet, and like she just wanted to know what was going on. And as soon as they say that, like you're in. And that's how I've gotten 2 internships, and that's also how I got my PhD application acceptance. So if you're in doubt, submit early, make sure your rec letters are good, have a native English speaker reread your essay, because having a native English speaker reread your essay will help with the grammar things that only native English speakers know, because our language is ridiculously complex for no apparent reason. And on top of all of that, always follow up, always email the program directors. And if you feel like, oh, I need to have this email proofread, also have somebody proofread the email for you, because a lot of times if you're like emailing them, that's their first interaction with you, so you want to make sure it's a good one.
Right. Thank you very much for your advice. Like, then I have another question. Just it will be last one, maybe for now. Okay. Then sometimes I'm struggling to decide in order to choose which universities could be suitable for me. Yeah. Then there are universities always require just application fees. Yeah. Then if I decide, okay, then I must decide and consider which university I need, or I'm going to apply for this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then nowadays I'm thinking applying more universities internationally abroad, like not just I mean USA,
yeah.
because yeah, some other countries also have available kind of good scholarships for international students. That's why. Then I found when I searched details, informations like application fees for just in order to give a try for US universities by applying. Then I got information from the internet. Some universities do not get application fees. I'm not trusting them. How is it possible or not? What do you think? Or what's your?
So for me, application fees depended from school to school. So at Rutgers, because I did an internship in 2019, my application fee was waived when I applied to grad school in 2021. So I didn't pay anything to apply here. But I also applied to some other schools and the application fees were anywhere from $70 to like $125, which I know with the exchange rate is quite expensive, especially for students in Uzbekistan, because that's American dollars don't exchange well pretty much anywhere else. So if that is an issue for you, what I would do is say like, hey, like I'm an international student. I'm applying to several universities. Is there any way that I could get like application fee remission? Because I don't necessarily have the money to send like 10 applications out and drop $700 US on this, like on these applications, like right now. Like that's not something that's financially possible for me. So if that is an issue for you, email financial aid. And I've never heard of universities not asking for application fees, but I have heard of some universities having like programs that you can apply to get the application fee waived. The other thing is my experience with universities is primarily universities on the East Coast in the Northeast of the United States. So if the US is a square, I'm familiar with this corner of it. So on the West Coast, they use different exams to go to college. They use the ACT instead of the SAT. And so like I might not necessarily be as familiar with what's going on the West Coast. So maybe those schools are the ones that don't have application fees. I don't know. But if it's a problem, email financial aid and they can usually make something happen. And if they can't, maybe that's not a school that you want to go to.
Have you ever tried to apply other universities and like internationally?
Internationally, yes. So because I am Dutch, I have European Union citizenship. So I did apply for master's programs in the Netherlands, but most of the education in the Netherlands is still in English. The applications there were not too complicated. I didn't really have a problem with that. There was a website that I found where I could search like specifically what I wanted to do when I was over there, because if I was moving to the Netherlands for my degree, my older sister did that. So she's currently in Scotland getting her master's in biophysics. And so if I did that, I would probably follow in her footsteps. But there was a website that they had that basically collated all of the universities in the Netherlands. And so I would type in like biomedical sciences master's program, and it would pull up like Nijmegen and a bunch of other universities like Amsterdam University and stuff like that. And then I could click on there and apply through that site. Like, have you heard of the Common app?
No.
It's like a application system in the United States where you write one application and then you can submit it to different universities. So when I was applying to school in the Netherlands, they had like a Dutch Common app. And that basically was like, oh, like you fill out this basic information, we'll send it to the university. And then the applications there work a little bit differently. So it's more like they get my basic information and they determine from that I'm qualified to apply to their master's program. And then I apply to the master's program and they tell me whether or not it got in. So I was applying to master's programs in the Netherlands at the same time I was applying to PhD programs in the US. And I was just kind of like, if I get into a PhD, I'll just go for the PhD. But if I don't, I'll just go get a master's and then I'll come back for my PhD. because the way it works in the US and the way it works in Europe are a little bit different. So here I can go for a PhD without my master's, and it will take me the same amount of time as someone who does have their master's. But for someone who's applying in Europe, you have to have a master's before you can get a PhD. It's not an option to skip the master's. So that's why if I was going to go to school in the Netherlands, I didn't apply to PhD programs because I couldn't apply to PhD programs. So I would have had to get a master's. And I don't know what it's like for international students applying to schools in the Netherlands, but for me as a citizen, it is less expensive for me to apply to a master's program there. And for me to go there, it's like 2,000 euros like a semester. So that's like 4,000 euros overall. Versus if you're applying to a United States master's program, it's like $30,000 for a year. So that's like $15,000 each semester. And if you're going to a private university, it could be even more expensive. So that's something that you should definitely keep an eye out on. And if cost is something that's important to you and you need to keep an eye on, then you should apply to probably 1-year master's programs in the US to limit the cost. And also, like, you already have a master's. So I don't see why you would need another 2 years master's program. Like you could do a 1-year master's program in the United States and be completely fine. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, I see some chats. So let me check those. What do you think about citing famous people in your essays? So something to note about citing famous people in your essays is it's better to cite from a book or a source than it is to just say like Julius Caesar once said, insert quote. So I think you can do it, but it is something that you have to be extremely confident in. Like I typically don't put citations in essays that I'm writing if I'm not writing them for scientific literature. Like I won't quote people because that's not my area of expertise. And I don't know what the writing standard is in like English circles and stuff like that. So if you're writing a general application essay, I would recommend against submitting something with a direct quote from a famous person. And also I wouldn't do like celebrities or anything like that. I don't think you guys would do that, but just so you know, don't cite like Kim Kardashian or something like that. Not a credible source. No one wants to hear from her. So probably focus on like academics. And if you want to, you can include a citation to something, but make sure that it's something that would bring value to your essay and not something that you just want to put in there because it's important to you.
Yeah, I know usually some people just add proverbs, some statements.
Oh, yeah, proverbs and stuff like that. That's fine.
Okay.
Like if you say like, oh, people always told me, cat got your tongue, because I had a lot of trouble speaking when I was a kid. Like that would be something that would be like a cool thing to say. You don't need to cite like turns of phrase like that. And that would be a really good way to like open an essay up.
Mhm.
Like if you have a quotation that like somebody says to you a lot, like, oh, like God wills it. Like my mom said, God wills it. And then you're just sitting there and you're like, well, that's basically mom saying no. And that's something that's important for you to include in your essay and it contributes to your story. Like, yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
I just think that like, for me personally, that's not my essay writing style. I prefer to show people things rather than tell them. And that's something that they'll look for a lot in your essays. Like they don't want you to say, my hair is brown. Or like, I went through X when I was in school. They want to know like, I was sitting down for my exam. My hands were shaking. I was nervous. I knew that I hadn't studied enough for this, but I had to take it now. And there was no going back to fix it. Like that draws you in a lot more than I failed my exam.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, if anything, write something that will hook people. Like, when you're reading a book and you read the first like paragraph, and if it's not good, you're like, I just can't read the rest of this book because I don't feel like I'm going to get it. It's not something that I'm interested in. then you've kind of lost the reader. And it's the same way with your essays. Like, make sure that when you're writing your essays, it's in a context where people are like, I have to finish it. Like, this is something, like, this is an interesting story.
Yeah. So is it like, okay, not to be like a bit informal in those type of essays then?
For college application essays, yes. For graduate school applications, I would say probably less so. So for graduate school applications, I would say, like, you could still talk about the struggles that you went through, but I feel like you should emphasize like your academic experiences. So you should say like, oh, like, I got my master's here and like, this is my experience going to this school and I would like to continue my education further, blah, 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 blah. Because there's like, it depends heavily on the school, what they want from you for a graduate application. Because at least for Rutgers, I don't feel like they wanted me to write a very personal essay. They wanted me to like summarize what I'd been doing for the last 4 years. They're like, why are you applying here? Like, what was the reason? Like, you need to tell me why you should be at Rutgers and why you would be an asset to my program. And I don't think telling them a story about like how I failed my exam would do that. I feel like telling them like, oh, like, I remember when I was a kid, I looked through a microscope and I saw cells for the first time. And I knew that that's what I wanted to look at for the rest of my life. And I wanted to do that research and I wanted to understand biology better. And so ever since I was like 12, what I've been doing is trying to make sure that I can go to PhD programs and get into a PhD program and go to graduate school, because that's something that's really important to me. And these are all the things that I've done. And this is how they've shaped my research interests. So it's still coming at it from a personal lens, but it's covering more of what your experience in a professional setting has been, rather than just straight up saying like, I got a master's here and I want to go there for my PhD, because that they're just going to flip right past that. I see another chat. How to end an essay? What kind of conclusion part is better? And is there a difference between a motivational essay and an application essay, or are they the same thing? So for a motivational essay and an application essay, I would say that they are different things, but it depends on the context for the application. So for me, a lot of times when I would write my essays, I would write them probably in a way that's closer to a motivational essay than I feel most people would. Like, most people would say like, oh, like, I really want to go to this school because I like have met a lot of the students that have gone here and I feel like this is a good place for me and it's a good fit. And I really value the, like, the education that they have here. And these have been like my experiences. A lot of times when I write essays, I want to draw people in and I want people to like read what I'm writing just because they want to read it, because that will make them a lot more invested in what my application says than I feel like writing like a standard essay would. Because like, if you're saying something like, oh, like, I was standing outside the classroom door and I knew the second that I walked in, my classmates would be judging me because like I couldn't afford the textbooks and I was anxious about going in, but I know I need to pursue an education in order to like further my dreams. That's something like the school would be interested in hearing. And it also sounds a little bit motivational. So I feel like a hybrid of the two would probably be best for an application essay. But that's my personal style. And so if that's not what your style is, that's fine. Find someone who has a similar writing style to you that would be able to proofread your essays and be like, hey, maybe change this or maybe change that. Because something that I find really crucial for my writing is proofreading. And if you don't have someone that can proofread, put it into a Word document and the Word auto like spell check will tell you where your grammar is a little bit messed up. There's other programs that can do it online, but Word is free. And another thing that I find important is if that doesn't work for you, you can paste it into Google Translate. You don't have to translate it into anything. Just click the audio button and it will read through it. And you can hear if you have typos or if you can hear like what it would sound like when someone else is reading it. And it kind of removes it from the context of your brain and it gets you out of your head about your essay. So listening to it is a really good way to like process, like, this is what my essay sounds like. I don't like how this part sounds, so I'm going to reword it. Or I think that it needs to be like the frame needs to be shifted because it doesn't make the point that I want it to be making. And then how to end an essay, what kind of conclusion part is better? So this draws back to like personal style, but I like to have like tidy stories that like tie up at the end. So it's like, for example, when I was talking about like failing the exam, it's like, I didn't do well on my first OChem exam. So if I were to write about it, I would be like, I walked in, I knew I didn't study enough. I opened my school app and I saw that I got a 68% on my first OChem exam. It was the only time I ever failed an exam in undergrad, and I was completely freaking out. So the result of it was I studied hard, and I went to every single office hour with my professor, and I did all of the homework, and I made sure that I had flashcards that I had with me everywhere I walked in university. And all I did was study organic chemistry. And my next exam score was an 86. So if that's a good way to tell a story. You don't want to tell an open-ended story. You want a story to have like a beginning, middle, and end. So like the beginning is, I didn't do well on my OChem exam because I had never studied in my life before that. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I took this OChem exam and I got a 68, and that's the middle. And the middle is also, after I got that 68, I was completely freaked out. I was stressed. I was like, I need to learn how to study because I need this class for my degree, and I need to make sure that I get a good grade at the end of it so I can go to grad school. And then you talk about how you were studying and how you changed your behavior to make sure that you would be able to go to grad school, and how you learned to be a better student from that situation. And then you would conclude it with saying, the next grade I got on my OChem exam was an 86. The following exam was a 97. And I learned how to study, and I learned how to be a better student from that experience. And I might not have gotten an A in the class overall, but I learned how to have discipline, and I learned how to be a responsible adult, and it taught me how to take my classes seriously. And that's something that they need to hear, because they need to know that you have it together and that you're going to be able to handle graduate school or undergrad, because a lot of American students can't. And they're just told to go to school, and they just do that because their parents say to. And if you say like, education is a priority for me, that's going to be something that they find very important, because a lot of American students, at least from my experience, don't take education as a priority, or they take other things in education as a priority over that. So when schools see you saying like, I fought hard for my education and I tried really hard and I'm doing the best that I can with the resources that I have, and I want you to know that I will continue doing that at your university, that's something that they're going to take note of and they're going to value. So yeah, I would say make sure that if you're telling a story through your essay, that it has an end and it has a positive end, or if it has a negative end, it's a negative end that you got a positive learning experience from. So don't tell stories that are still happening. Like, I can't write an essay right now about what it's like to get a PhD. I haven't even finished my qualifying exams in my PhD program. I'm not qualified to talk about that. So you write stories about things that have happened in your past that have shaped who you are, that have concluded either positively or negatively, but they've had a positive impact on you. But yeah.
All right. What you say about making future plan, like research plan? How we can write and then correct research plan? One year ago, I sent my research plan for some university professors. They give kind of rejections. Yep. Then I don't know how to fix it. I didn't know. Then still, I'm struggling with it.
So what I would do is I would look for peers in the same field as you that are doing research point blank, because if there's someone else that you can sit down and read this through with, that's going to be extremely helpful. Because something that I've learned through the first couple months of my PhD is that what I write and what people might necessarily expect from the writing that I'm doing are two different things. So I have to submit summaries of my rotations. And I wrote the summary in third person. And I was like, we conducted experiments were conducted on immune cells. And we looked at like this. And my grad student was like, no, you looked at this. You did this. This needs to be written in the first person. And that's not something that I would have picked up on if I had been by myself and I hadn't had her to tell me like, why are you writing it like this? You need to change that. So it's important for you to have someone who's in your field that can help you with that. And maybe if your research proposal isn't getting the traction that you would like from the professors in your field, you should reach out to maybe more junior professors and say like, hey, I'm trying to like get my research in a better state. I need to write this proposal. This is what I kind of want to do with my like education and my future. So would you mind giving me like 15 minutes of your time to just read this and give me a few critiques so I can make it better? That's something that I find vitally important, like connections in your field. So also another thing with grad school is sometimes they will have like Zoom calls. I know COVID has been bad, but it has been a revolution because they put everything on Zoom now. So if you were like, oh, like, I don't know if I want to go to this grad school, I don't know if this is a good fit for me, they have recruiting events that are all on Zoom. All of the interviews for graduate school, all on Zoom. They don't bring people in person anymore. You don't have to worry about buying a plane ticket halfway across the planet to go interview at a grad school. They're just going to send you a Zoom link. And that might kind of suck because you want to see a school in person, but it is a huge benefit to international students like yourselves if you're trying to come to the United States, because that Zoom link, even if it's at a weird hour of the night or something like that, that is your like gateway. That is your door in. And so they will have events where they're like, we're recruiting. Please join us for like this Zoom call, or like we're having a seminar and somebody's coming to talk. Attend those events at a university, even if you don't necessarily go there, like the public events that they post. Or if they're hosting like classes on LinkedIn, if you don't have a LinkedIn, you should probably make one. You can search mine up if you would like a template. That's fine. Go ahead, take screenshots, whatever you need. It's all good to me. But you should make sure like, oh, I'm following the dream universities on LinkedIn. This is what they're saying. This is what they're posting. This is what seems to be important to them. And then you tailor your application to that, and you attend all of the like calls and recruiting events and stuff that they have going on for international students, or for basically anything that you're interested in. And when you attend those events, make sure that they know your face, make sure that they know who you are, ask questions, be present, because that will also give you the same like face and name recognition when you apply that emailing the advisors and people who are running like the applications will do. So make sure that you use the connections that the school puts out, because a lot of times in my experience, American students don't utilize those. I don't utilize those, but I know that they are important. I already had connections at my graduate school because I had internships. But if you don't have access to that, then you need to make sure that you're making connections in other ways, because if they know who you are, they're a lot more likely to accept you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Okay. Awesome. Actually, yes, last year I got some interview with some professors from some South Korean universities, like Sejong University and some other universities. They invited me to. Okay, they yes, they said that they able to accept me for this kind of scholarships, but they give me suggestions. First of all, I need to publish some, how can I say, perspective, high index journal publications. Then this could be a problem, but I have publications and I showed them, but that time was bad pandemic situation in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. That's why I rejected because that time I got married. That's why this kind of things, and I how can I say rejected this. Then this year I sent message, but they didn't reply me again.
Ah, okay. So you might not have a chance with that university again because they already gave you an acceptance, but it just wasn't the right time for you because
Then
timing is also important. So maybe try applying to similar level universities in Korea, or you could reach out to them and say like, hey, I'm sorry, I just got married. I didn't have the financial capability to pay for school. A lot of times, like what's happening right now in the US with applications is that people deferred. So in my application year, 30% of the spots in the PhD programs were already taken when people were applying in 2021, because the people from 2020 said, I'm going to wait for the pandemic to cool down before I go to grad school. And that's not happening anytime soon. And so they deferred, and then they realized this is just going to be reality for the next 5 to 10 years. So I should just go ahead and start my PhD. And when they decided that, they took all of the spots that were available in my year. So instead of competing for 20 spots, I was competing with everyone for 12 spots instead. And so that also impacts applications right now because a lot of people are still deferring, aren't sure. When the financial situation in the US is bad, people go to graduate school. So there are more applicants right now as well. That's also something that's important to note. So if you would have gotten in 2018, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll get in 2022 because of the changed situation.
Sometimes finding suitable courses, appropriate universities, they have drawn me crazy because, you know, currently I'm good for a data science course, like a data science subject, then direction. Then I'm looking for this kind of how can I majority course for paying to the PhD, but most of university don't have this kind of course, but just a few university have this kind of direction, but they do not offer scholarships. That's why when I ask suggestion from my friends or some teachers, they suggest me or recommend me this. I need to find just professors who offer me scholarships from these universities and need to write my research plan. That's why, yeah, I'm how can I say struggling to write again different research plans, but how can I say relative to by connecting to my subject.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I understand that. I mean, for me, it's a little bit different because my first year of my PhD, I won't be doing research plans that I have come up with. I'll be working on research plans for my principal investigator or my PI, the person who runs the lab. And then during my second year of my PhD, I will be talking with them and setting up what my thesis would be. So I don't necessarily have a whole lot of experience with writing research plans, but for me at least, if I needed experience for what I wanted to research, I would find professors whose research interested me, and I would say, how can I move that forward? So I like looking at microscope images. I like taking microscope images. So the current rotation that I'm doing is using basically the newest microscope that uses the most advanced lasers that can do live imaging. And live imaging is something that's kind of blowing up in biology right now. So something that I'd be interested in is the progression of live imaging of immune cells, like how they interact when they're exposed to bacteria, what implications that has for people who have infections. So if you are looking for new research opportunities, don't plagiarize. Make sure you are not plagiarizing, but definitely think about like, I'm interested in this professor who's researching like the descent of English from Old English, and he looks specifically at like how verbs have changed and how we got irregular tenses. Like that might be something cool. So if I wanted to look at irregular tenses in verbs, maybe I should look at them in early English to middle English, or maybe I should look at them in a different context, combine other research things you've seen from other people and come up with your own unique ideas, because there is no such thing as a unique idea. So what you need to do is you need to put things together in a unique way, because someone's already thought about it. They just haven't published it. So don't feel pressure to be like, everything I do has to be like singular. Everything I do has to be an absolutely 100% from my brain thought. Your thoughts and your experiences are influenced by the other papers you read. So something that I would really recommend is read papers on things that are adjacent to your field of interest, not necessarily just in your field of interest, because those will give you ideas from other fields that you can bring into your field and basically make another research plan for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
But basically the answer is reading. And most of the time, if you have questions, the answer is reading. So yes, I have, but this is being recorded. So if you would like to basically watch back the recording, I've probably been talking about essay writing for, about an hour. But in summary for essay writing, I'll give you a little overview. I think that you should write something that has the flow of a story. So write something about like, oh, I struggled with this, and this is how I resolved that struggle, and this is where it's taken me now. So an example I spoke about earlier is I took organic chemistry, which is a chemistry class about how basically biological molecules are synthesized. And the first exam I took in that class, I got a 68%, not good. And so I basically followed that up with studying all the time, trying to learn from my classmates, study groups, stuff like that. And the next exam I got an 86. And so you can also use stories like that to explain like gaps in your academic history. So if you're like, oh, I was doing really well in university, and then my parents got sick and I had to go home, and like I wanted to go back to university, and I spent the whole time reading and writing these research plans and doing my best to like make sure that when I had the chance to go back, that I would be prepared. And now I have the chance to go back, and I am prepared, and I'm ready to go back to grad school. And this is what I can bring to you, because like, even when I'm not in school, this is what I think about, and this is what I want to do with my time. So I'm going to make sure that I can provide that level of interest that you need in a grad student in order to be able to survive graduate school. Like I have the passion for this subject. But yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Nathalie. I think you gave so much of insight to all of these essays and to several questions. So if you guys have any more questions, you can ask maybe in the comments or just texting directly some of us. It's like in the Telegram channel, so they have like a comment box, so they can ask there and we can try to answer. But unfortunately, the time is already like past 1 hour.
Yeah.
So we don't want to spend too much on that. And I will stop recording. And but yeah, thank you a lot. And this will be the end of our session. So unless you have like really quick questions, this is it.
But yeah, thank you guys for listening. You've been great to talk to.
Thank you very much.